Yeah, I'm going to get one in right after this, actually. There was a bear in my neighborhood today.
We had that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Polar bear.
Oh. I was just looking at a bunch of
No
cocks.
chance.
But
Polar
because I was
bear.
in Key West, there's roosters everywhere. That's what I meant.
Yeah. What, Matt?
No, polar bear. No.
What are you talking? Yeah, dude.
No, dude.
They're elusive.
This is like your dog bit your finger's hands.
My daughter's hand?
Yeah.
Look, I thought it was just as strange as you did, especially in May. All right. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stokastic.com MLB strategy show. Dave Loughran, Matt Belman, 10-game action. Getting down, man. We got a good slate today for sure. Some very interesting pitching, better than we had yesterday. And let's hope not as much weather. Like from everything I'm seeing, it doesn't. I mean, there's a few spots. Don't get me wrong, but for this later slate, for the 7 p.m. and later, it looks like we really only have, Matt, one spot that looks bad. And unfortunately, that has Kevin Gausman in it, which is just like a phenomenal spot. He's coming off probably his best start of the season. He's going up against the White Sox today. But aside from that, I think all of the games, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think all of the other games I'm seeing are prior to the 7 p.m. lock.
Yeah, you are 100% correct there. And even with Gausman, like, yeah, he's a very good option, but we've got a very loaded pitching slate. So even if that game's not in play, I don't think it really changes the slate all dramatically.
No, probably not. But it definitely is a nice spot for him. I still don't know what to make of Gausman yet. Like, because he hasn't been consistent. But, you know,
He's 8,500.
What's that?
He's only 8,500.
Which is kind of wild in this start, or in this spot, for real. Anyway, happy to have you guys with us. Very happy to have you here. It's Tuesday, coming off the weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Boy, did I pay for it the last couple of days. Let me tell you that much. But we're back. We're feeling good. It's time to talk baseball. If you don't mind, do us one solid single favor. Atone for your sins here and hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. Mike, see if you can get those comments turned on. I don't know why YouTube is defaulting to this. It keeps turning comments off. Not your fault. I don't know what it is. Jordan had the same issue with videos. See if you can get them turned on, because that's just dumb. And if you ever want to listen in podcast form, you know where to find us, right? Apple Podcast, Spotify. You don't want to listen on YouTube? We got you covered everywhere else. This will be up, like an hour or whatever, maybe even sooner after it's over. So appreciate you guys being here. Let's dive into it. 10 games today. Matt, I have already updated the tools for today. We got the top pitchers, top stacks, ownership. I ran the sims for today's slate. And I will point out that at the moment, there is one pitcher that I am getting quite a bit of. A guy who last week, I said I was going to get a decent amount of. I split him 30% with two other cheap options on that same slate. Ended up being fine. I think it was actually Feltner. And who was the other one for Oakland? Who was the Oakland pitcher? Who was the other Oakland? Thank you, Joey Estes. Yes, it was Joey Estes. Matt Waldron against Miami. I'm getting some Matt Waldron today, and I'm getting a lot. Do I think it holds the amount that I'm getting? No, but I get why he's pulling ownership. He's had some significant strikeout stuff. It's a quality park for pitchers. Miami can be a thorn in the side sometimes, but this is still the furthest thing from a quality opponent. Yeah, just to kick it off, getting a lot of Matt Waldron.
Not surprised by that at all. I know you were on him last week against Cincinnati. I don't even know. I'm not sure we've done a show since the Braxton Garrett show, but I feel like we definitely need to take a victory lap on that one. He was one of the best pitchers we've seen all year. So just wanted to throw that out there. As far as Waldron goes today, he just stands out because of what you said. The matchup, the ballpark, and the price tag. So this is a fun slate. You said it when you first came on here because there's a lot of different ways to go. There are expensive bats all over the place. We've got a Coors game with pretty weak pitching, especially from the Colorado side. We've got other good offenses all over the board. There's also very good pitchers across every price point. I mean, Wheeler, Peralta, Luis Castillo, to go on. I mean, Ragans. There are a bunch of different ways to play this slate. If you want expensive bats, I don't see that many ways to pivot off of Waldron. There's certainly other cheap pitchers, but he's the guy that stands out.
And shout out to Einsteinium for kind of pointing us in the direction to look at Garrett. Once you see that ownership that was essentially zero and his price point, you kind of just had to take some stabs. That look, I think you and I and a lot of people in chat too, like watching the show, always very willing to look at some of these low-owned guys and go, oh, he's cheap, he's low-owned, he's really not that much worse than some of these guys that are getting ownership. That's just the way it plays sometimes, but there are a few cheap guys that stand out to me. I mean, Waldron being one of them. Jake said he's considering stacking Miami because of the Waldron ownership. Look, I get it. I don't think Waldron's particularly good. I do like what we've seen as far as strikeout stuff, even though his swinging strike rate hasn't been elite. And the other one, man, like we'll get into Wheeler. We'll get into Gossman and Peralta and Reagan's facing Minnesota. And also, last I looked 15 minutes ago, we still had 2 TBD pitchers for today, Texas and San Francisco. I think it could be Spencer Howard for San Francisco.
That's just a wow. The fact that it's Spencer Howard, he stinks. I mean, he's an old Phillies farm man.
Yes. The DraftKings Sportsbook still has Mason Black listed for San Francisco. He was sent to AAA like 3 days ago. So
I'm seeing Spencer Howard. Yeah. At most places I'm seeing Howard.
Maybe they updated it. I looked 15 minutes ago and Mason Black was still listed as the probable. Yeah, he still is. He's still listed as the probable. I don't think he's even in the player pool on DraftKings right now. I don't think
that's weird. That's weird.
Yeah. Whatever. It doesn't matter. But there's 2 really cheap guys that stand out. You know who they are. You guys listening know who they are. It's Matt Waldron and Hunter Brown. Righties versus Seattle, right, Matt? I mean, I'll probably have a relatively difficult time getting away from Hunter Brown right now. First Sims run, I'm getting 30%. Look, he's been a colossal disappointment this season. He's been better than earlier in the year when you knew that was just impossible to continue. He got BABIP to death. His BABIP is still 355 on the season. His strand rate is still down. Don't get me wrong. He hasn't been particularly good, but he has a 4.4 xERA, 4.2 xFIP, 7.06 ERA. So there are some signs that would point towards him not being as bad as he is. 22% strikeout rate and a 9.5% swinging strike rate on the year, which is, down from previous seasons. But when you're getting him in this spot, I think you're almost going to be obligated to get to some of this here. And the last thing I'll say about Hunter Brown before you dig in on these cheap guys, if you look at his expected rates, expected ISO, ex-WOBA against lefties and righties, 120 x ISO against lefties compared to a 212 actual ISO, 157 x ISO against righties, 218 actual ISO. And then against lefties, 313 x WOBA, 371 WOBA, 422 WOBA against righties, but a 358 x WOBA. Not great, but still showing that he hasn't been nearly as bad as the numbers on the surface would indicate. I'm a sucker for throwing guys out against Seattle, but I like Seattle bats and Hunter Brown today, and I can say that pretty confidently.
I'm 100% with you, but I actually like Hunter Brown today more than I've liked this spot in the past, because I personally think Waldron is going to be very high owned. Like, we have him projected for 24% ownership, but I think that could get steamed throughout the day because he is the clear guy to go to if you want to spend up on bats. Hunter Brown would be that guy, but you've got Waldron, who showed good strikeout upside, who is in a better spot as far as safety goes at home. I think the field flocks to Waldron. I like Brown more. I don't think you have to play either of these guys because there's so many good pitchers on the slate. The problem is, and this is where Gaussman comes in, like you either have these really cheap guys or you want to spend all the way up. There isn't much in between aside from Gaussman himself.
Right. Agreed. Another thing too is you're probably getting what, 5 lefties in this Miami lineup, which is definitely preferable for somebody like Waldron. Like swinging strike rate versus righties is significantly higher. Go take a look. It's like 11.5% versus righties, 7.5% against lefties. He has some pretty serious splits this year against lefties and righties. So when I'm looking at this Miami team, are there any lefties that really scare me? You know, Jazz is gonna swing for the fences, might tag him, possible, or strike out. I can't imagine you have a ton of fear in your heart from a guy like Nick Gordon on a slate like this. And then Sanchez and Bell, assuming Sanchez and the switch hitting Bell are in the lineup, there's that. But yeah, with Waldron, I will say he has been a lot better against righties than he has against lefties. Just throwing it out there, like a 4.38 xFIP versus lefties, 3.74 versus righties, 25% K rate against righties, and I think 21% against lefties. He still strikes them out, but the numbers don't look nearly as good. So this is actually on paper a pretty good matchup for Waldron. There's maybe one lefty that really scares me, but also strikes out, so I don't care that much.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The spot just, we know Seattle strikes out a lot more than basically everyone else, but their offense is a lot better than Miami's. So I understand why the ownership will flock to Waldron and why we project him to be higher owned. It just seems like a misprice. Like I hate playing Waldron on slates like this where you're, not playing Freddy Peralta or Cole Ragans or whatever it is, but the price matters a lot, especially when you want expensive bats. If you don't have the appetite for expensive bats, I don't think you need to get down here. But I, for one, I like Cleveland. I like Philly a lot. They've got expensive bats all over, so I'm probably going to need at least one of these guys.
Einsteinium asked, how do we feel about Luzardo on the other side of this game? Well, he's good, and he's probably cheaper than he should be. The matchup is unappealing. There's no doubt about that. The park is fine. He's getting 2% ownership. He does have one of the higher leverage scores in our top pitchers tool right now, 3rd highest on the slate. Luzardo is one of those guys that, like, at $8,000, I think you could make an argument for just because of pedigree, Matt.
100%. So a couple things you can make the argument for here. One, San Diego's been dog shit against left-handed pitching this year. You look at their lineup, and you wouldn't expect that to continue. That's just the facts. Luzardo coming off 2 really impressive performances, and that's not a fluke. Like, he's really, really good. Probably the best pitcher that will be available at this year's trade deadline, in my opinion. Would love the Guardians to go after him, but that's a topic for another day. It's hard to want to play him again because there's so many good pitchers on this slate, a lot of opportunity costs, but he is one of those guys I think you need to take a hard look at in the mid-range, especially if Gaussman is out of play. I view Luzardo as a prototypical boom-bust option here. Like, he's too cheap, but we know that San Diego has got very good hitters in their lineup against left-handed pitching, even though they haven't been good this year. So I think the floor is low, but the ceiling is very high for 8K.
The only thing here is that San Diego's got the 3rd lowest K rate versus lefties. Like, that's,
yeah,
because you're right. They haven't been particularly good. 90 WRC plus, 120 ISO for this team against lefties is bottom 8 in baseball. So yeah, like if he can pitch deep into this game at 8K, you also know that if this game plays between Toronto and the White Sox, Gaussman will be exponentially more popular.
Yeah, and to your point on Gaussman, I don't know who Gaussman is right now either. So almost feel better about who Luzardo is as a pitcher. That said, like, Gaussman can probably get by with being less of himself in this particular spot.
Man, what a fascinating slate, though, because you've got Wheeler,
Yeah,
who's getting a lot of ownership against the Giants in a good, pitcher-friendly park for sure. But then you've got a similarly priced, and we all know, right? Like if you asked which one of these guys is better, you're going to say Wheeler, and he's been doing it a lot longer, consistently for a lot longer. But Cole Reagans is fucking good, man. And he's got Minnesota. Now, it's a Minnesota team that against lefties is definitely less enticing of a target for opposing pitchers than they are against righties, right? They're middle of the road in strikeout rate. They're top 6 in ISO. I think they're top 10 in WRC plus this season. Yeah, 8th against lefties. But God, Reagans has been just phenomenal. And he has the type of upside to give you the slate winning performance. 10,200 coming off a 6 inning, 6 scoreless, 1 hit, 12 strikeout game against Detroit. Prior to that, 7 scoreless, 2 hit innings with 7 Ks against Oakland. He got tuned up by the Angels prior to that. But like when you just talk about upside, right? Like the ceiling games for these pitchers, Cole Reagans is as good as anybody right now.
He is. I got no argument with that. I also wouldn't argue you if you said it was Freddy Peralta in that role. I view those 3 guys as the top guys on the slate. I mean, they're all above 10K, as they should be. Peralta hasn't been as good as Wheeler or Reagans this year, but his strikeout upside is just as high, if not higher, than any of them. I think all 3 of these guys look like phenomenal options here. The problem is pairing 2 of them together leaves you very hamstrung as far as what you can do bat-wise. Like, because it's not just like you want to spend up for 2 pitchers. Like, they're all above 10K. So when you're spending over 20K on your 2 pitchers combined, you're going to have to concede a lot on offense. And there are some good offenses on this slate. So I view Wheeler, Peralta, and Reagans all very, very similar. Like, I think Wheeler's the best pitcher right now of the bunch. I prefer him at home. I know it's a ballpark upgrade for him. He just dominated the San Francisco team. I don't have any holes to pick into Wheeler. I just personally think Peralta and Reagans at a little bit of discounted prices are similarly strong plays.
Kind of how I feel. I mean, as good as Wheeler is, I think you can make a pretty good argument for Peralta as well. He is getting 19%, don't get me wrong, which by the way, Matt, is why I specifically mentioned Reagans, just because he's getting 8%. But I hear you on Freddy Peralta. Plus the Cubs, not a great matchup. They walk at one of the highest clips in the league against righties, which is, can be difficult sometimes. When Peralta gets out of control, like that just happens with him sometimes, right? Like he faced the Cubs earlier this season on May 5th and walked 6 batters. He walked 5 Pirates 2 starts before that, which is crazy because he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 starts with 1 or fewer walks. You just don't know when he's not going to have it. You know what I mean? I'm willing to take my chances. I don't really care. But it's not that bad of a spot. Like Chicago has the 7th highest K rate versus righties. 96 WRC plus is not great. It's 19th in the league. So yeah, do you take a little bit of the savings on Peralta over Wheeler? I think they're really close today, honestly.
Yeah, same. I mean, Peralta, you don't feel as safe about him, given what you talked about, the walks. He gets in his own way. I mean, he's been doing that for years, even though his stuff is elite. He hasn't quite put it all together yet. He's still got the highest strikeout rate on the slate. And like, I don't know. I'm with you. I really, really am finding it difficult to find the difference between these guys. I mean, I think they're priced fairly. If they were all the same price, I would slightly prefer Wheeler, but it wouldn't be anything like, if you told me you preferred Peralta or Reagans, I wouldn't think you're crazy at all.
Jake said San Francisco's been pretty hot lately for what it's worth. Yeah, it's tough to quantify, as you know, Jake. And also Philly might have peaked early. No, I mean they're still a good baseball team, but teams go through rough stretches in the past 4 games. Phillies, I mean, because they couldn't lose. That offense has gone completely quiet, completely silent recently. So, yeah, Coors Field, man, they They won that one game. They dropped 8 runs late from like role players. But aside from that, past handful of games, they haven't looked all that great. A lot of questions coming in or comments coming in on Cortes. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, so I guess the matchup now, you're talking about the Angels. It's, it's not a bad park for hitting. It's not a bad park for hitting. But Cortes is solid, and the Angels, you look at that lineup, you just have to think like it is crazy though. It's top 5 home run park for lefty and right-handed hitters over the last 3 years. You get the rolling average on Baseball Savant over the last 3 years. Pretty crazy. Cortes is 9,500. So you're definitely paying somewhat of a premium for him. He honestly might be the guy that I'm not getting to when it comes to a lot of these other high-priced options. What about you?
I'm 100% out on Cortes here. Not even totally about Cortes himself. Mostly has to do with how many good options there are. So again, this is kind of in the weeds a little bit, and I don't think it matters as much as some people want to make it matter. But on a slate like this with so many good options, you can nitpick a little bit. So Cortes throughout his career has been much, much better at home for whatever it's worth. And we see pitchers like this. Aaron Nola was like this for a while. If you just look at his game log on DK, and again, not game log chasing, his past 2 starts were at home. He had 24 and 29 DraftKings points. At Tampa, he had under 10. At home against Detroit, 26. At Baltimore, under 10. Oakland at home, he was just okay. Tampa at home, he had 30. At Cleveland, he had under 10. Miami, he had 33 at home. At Arizona and at Houston, both under 10. He doesn't have over 10 fantasy points on the road this year. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen tonight. Again, I'm not playing him because of that. But when he's priced up with the Peraltas and Wheelers and Ragans of the world, I personally don't feel like I need to get to him. If he were at home, I still probably wouldn't like him here. On the road, no thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. There's a lot of good pitchers on this slate. Jeremiah Johnson just said, I keep staring at Luis Castillo on FanDuel ... against Houston, though. Right. I mean, this is not, and I understand that, was it Miller? Yeah, Bryce Miller had a nice start yesterday in this same matchup. So you're not saying that it can't happen. It's obviously a pitcher-friendly park. Miller went, 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 Ks. Castillo's not exactly overpriced. He also he's been good. But I feel like he has, and maybe this is just me misremembering. I feel like he hasn't had the same strikeout stuff this season as he did. Let's see, 25. Okay, so 25.6%, 27.3% last year. He's also had a couple pretty tough matchups. It's still early in the season. Swinging strike rate is down 2.5%, but I don't know. Do I want to chase this against Houston? I guess it's like, I think there's a lot of other spots you can get different where you're getting pitchers that aren't pulling ownership, but you're still not like, you still don't have to go low ownership plus bad matchup game. I feel like there's plenty low ownership plus decent matchup spots today too.
I agree with you, but the counter to that would be there aren't any of those that are as good of pitchers as Castillo in my mind. So I'm torn here. I'm not exactly sure what to make of Castillo because I think he's way too cheap. In my mind, he is in that group as far as pitchers go, Wheeler, Ragans, Peralta. He's definitely in that group for me. But picking on Houston is more often than not a fool's errand. And while you can give him a mulligan for the past 2 starts, I mean, he was in Baltimore and in New York. Those are really tough spots. He's in a really tough spot here where Houston doesn't strike out. There's always a low floor. Now, I will say the back half of Houston's lineup isn't really as good as we remember it from years past, especially now that Jose Abreu is back in our lives. So I think that you can make a case for Castillo here just based on talent alone. And on FanDuel, it's probably even a stronger case because there are no really cheap options aside from Hunter Brown to look at. And Castillo is 9,200 while Waldron's 8,400. So I think that makes sense there. On DK, I'm intrigued, But I do think ultimately at the end of the day, you're right, and that you just don't need to go to this spot.
Yeah, you make a good point there, just based on like Castillo's in that weird spot where Waldron at 8,400 is wild. Like I would rather go to Nestor Cortes over Waldron on FanDuel. I'd rather go to Luis Castillo. But then you've got like, again, so here's not a better, but another example to kind of drive home what you were saying. Jesus Luzardo is 9,600 on FanDuel. Castillo is 9,200. Luzardo, who's also not in a great spot, but has excellent strikeout stuff, and I think both of us agree is a very good pitcher. He's 1,200 cheaper than Castillo on DraftKings and also not getting any ownership.
Yeah, exactly. So see this eye to eye. Like on one hand, because it's a one pitcher site, it's harder to make the case for Castillo. But on the other, and I've been talking about this with Greg a lot, FanDuel has condensed their pitcher pricing a lot. So they've raised the high end and like it's the pitchers are usually much closer together than on DK. Now you've got a couple outliers today. Hunter Brown still down there. There's Ben Brown, Simeon, Woods Richardson, but you're seeing it like with Waldron, Luzardo. From Luzardo up in our top pitcher tool, it's 8,400 to 10,800. That's like the range. So I think with Castillo being on the lower end of that range, he's more viable.
Right. Muhammad asked, what about Woods Richardson? Yeah, I mean, I'm out on Woods Richardson, honestly. I don't really buy it. I think like I'd rather go to Waldron, even at the ownership. I'd rather go to Waldron. I'd rather go to Hunter Brown. I don't know where you stand on this, but I look at Woods Richardson, and this is a guy that started off the season when he came against Detroit, White Sox, Seattle, right? Detroit, White Sox, Seattle. So in two of those games, he had a 10 and 11 and 11% swinging strike rate. His swinging strike rate in every other game, 2.6% against Washington, 7% against Cleveland, 7% against Toronto, 2% against the White Sox in that other one, and 7% against Detroit. I just don't see where you're going to get the strikeout stuff from Woods Richardson at almost 7K to make it worthwhile, unless you're just getting a lot of called strikes and looking strikeouts. I don't really feel like you have to take that risk today. To me, it just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, there's no way I'm playing someone like that today. I mean, the only reason I'm even looking at guys like Waldron and Hunter Brown is because they're so cheap. They're much better than Woods Richardson. Ideally, you don't have to play anyone in this range. I get it. Like, they're definitely expensive bats to go to. But for me, the only two even viable guys worth looking at are Waldron and Brown. Under 7K, that is.
Here's a fun one from Richie and Arcadoza. How about Tristan McKenzie? So, all right, we've talked a lot about pitchers at Coors Field, and sometimes they perform quite well. Rockies bats have woken up a little bit lately. It's starting to get a little bit warmer in Coors Field, which is something that and I know you do, absolutely take into consideration here. It's a lot easier in April and early May. It's going to be, 72 degrees at first pitch, so nothing crazy. Winds blowing out to center field at 8 miles per hour. Not big winds, but winds. 35% ground ball rate for McKenzie this year. I'm never unwilling to roster pitchers at Coors Field. I think I'm going to pass on Tristan McKenzie today. His velocity still isn't entirely back up. What about you, Matt? You willing to dive in on that 7K price point?
Definitely not. No way. He's looked very iffy through much of the season. His numbers are okay. His underlying numbers are worse. He's still fighting through that injury, and he's been a gamer, and I like him a lot from like a Cleveland Guardians fan perspective. I can't imagine playing him on a slate with so many other good options in Coors. Like, he could be fine, but I can't see it on this slate. I guess the only thing to counter that, I would say, and yeah, countering myself again, is that if this game were in Cleveland, he would be a lot higher owned. Even still, I don't think I'd like him much there. So I get it. He's cheap for who how he's normally priced, but I'm not into the Coors pitcher today.
All right, one other guy, and again, if you guys have questions, throw them in chat. No problem. This is an easy enough way for Matt and I to run through pitching options. You got questions on them, toss them in there, and we'll break them all down. This is just one of those slates where there's probably like 5-6 good pitchers that you just aren't likely going to get a lot of. It's just the way it is.
Right.
Even if you're playing a lot of lineups. Washington has punished good pitchers lately. Not all of them, obviously. It has been strange, right? Like we've seen a decent amount of good pitchers face Washington and just kind of get punished. Doesn't really mean much. They're still, bottom 4 in WOBA versus lefties, 78 WRC plus against lefties this season, 22+% strikeout rate, which is 13th, essentially tied for 11th in the league. This feels like one of those starts where Fried has like 5 strikeouts and goes 8 scoreless. Like not a crazy strikeout game, but just pitches super deep, efficient, shuts them down. I do actually have some interest in Max Fried here today. I'm not particularly scared of this Washington team. And Fried is the type of guy, as we saw with his last start against the Cubs, where when he gets going, he's outstanding. Dude, he, outside of that one start recently against San Diego, and I guess you could say the Dodgers, but even though he only gave up 4 hits, he gave up 2 homers. He has, look at these starts, like 7 innings, 0 hits. That was 3 starts ago, Matt. 5 starts ago against Seattle, 6 innings, 0 hits, 9 innings, 3 hits. Like Max Fried. Oh, here's another one. 9 innings, 3 hits. He might not have elite strikeout stuff, but shit, this dude can go deep into games and just completely keep you off the bases.
Yeah, I'm in on Fried here, I think, as my favorite pitcher that's not the group of top guys. I definitely like him over Cortes. It's close with Castillo. I think Castillo's the better DFS pitcher, but I like the matchup for Fried more. Those 2 guys I'm going back and forth with, but Fried could easily just be a casualty of the slate because there's so many good pitchers, but he's definitely like in my pool. And if I can't get to one of the top guys, I got no problem dropping down to Fried, especially if Gaussman isn't in play and we just don't know yet.
Is there anyone we haven't talked about yet?
One guy I want to call out, and I don't want to play him here because the matchup's not great. Texas is much better against righties, but we've talked about Brandon Pfaadt a bunch, and he's been really good, especially his last 2 starts in not the greatest spots. I can't even remember exactly who they were. Let me pull it up real quick. They were at the Dodgers and against the Reds at home. I mean, he just carved the Dodgers. And again, I'm not saying that he's going to do that to the Rangers tonight, but all things considered, if he were in that Matt Waldron range, I would much prefer to play Brandon Pfaadt. And while he's a little bit more expensive, it's just a little bit. Like, I do think he's intriguing, if nothing else.
Okay. What about Dane Dunning on the other side? I'm not sure why he's getting that ownership.
Yeah, Arizona has not been good against righties. Frankly, they haven't been great against much lately. Ryan Weathers just shut them down on Sunday.
Very true.
Wait,
what did you say?
I said Ryan Weathers just shut them down on Sunday.
Yeah, and Braxton Garrett 2 days before, like they faced 2 lefties consecutively and got just not consecutive. Friday and Sunday, and got mauled by him.
They faced Sixto Sanchez in between those games, and were just okay. And he's been horrendous. So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't looking at Dunning too much, but when you think about like Waldron getting ownership, Hunter Brown getting ownership, it makes sense that Dunning's in that group too. I like the other guys more because I don't love the matchup here still. I think Dunning is not as good as Hunter Brown or Walt. I don't know. I think all these guys are similar, but he's the most expensive, so I'm out.
Talk about some bats. Actually, I always have to ask you this. I think we touched on most of it. Any completely unowned options? Because, by the way, Pfaadt is getting 15%. Are there any just entirely unowned options that you think are worth even the slightest bit of conversation?
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you asked that because I had a guy. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. Ryan Feltner. Talked about him a little bit this year. He's not great, but he's not awful either. I mean, his underlying numbers are much better than Tristan McKenzie's. He's got a 5.07 ERA, a 3.78 expected ERA, 3.38 WOBA, 3.11 expected WOBA. So again, his numbers are a lot better than on the surface they look, and you're getting him against the highest owned offense on the slate. I don't love the matchup. Cleveland doesn't strike out a lot, but he's 5,800. And I talked about my interest in Philly bats, who are the most expensive stack on the slate. I'm pretty sure you're going to have to do some weird stuff to get there. And I don't think Feltner is the craziest play in the world. I don't think he's a good play, but I don't think he's crazy.
All right. I love it. By the way, guys, you have interest in checking out the Sims, any of the tools, links are in the description and in chat. They've just been killing lately. Not just NBA Showdown. It's you just run these NBA Showdown Sims and the Stokastic avatars are popping up for 5, 10, 15, 20,000 a day. But MLB too, I mean, what a difference that makes, especially in weather games too. Now you have the late swap feature and all of that. The post-contest simulator where you can go in, see how all of your lineups did. Like, even if you didn't have a great day, you can see how they actually fared against the field to see if you're building good lineups and just maybe getting unlucky, to see what the best players are doing. But more than anything, like the post-contest sims or the pre-contest simulator where you're going in, it's simulating the contest that you're going to be in tens of thousands of times, spitting out the best lineups, the highest simmed ROI lineups, and you can filter by top 10 percentage. So in these sims, how many times was it top 10? How many times did it cash? What was the win percentage? You could see, the stack type, all of that stuff. And it'll just sort them by simmed ROI. You can pick the ones you like most. You can set exposure caps. You can do ROI boost to get more of who you're looking for. All of these features, everything. And then you go over to exposures once you favorite your lineups, and you can see all of your stack exposures, individual exposures, just a million different features on this tool that are going to make you love playing DFS even more, especially because you're going to be making better lineups than you are now, and it's going to be easier. Now, I know a lot of you like to hand build, and so be it. I mean, the lineup generator makes the perfect companion for hand building as well, and that's a great entry-level price where you can swap players, lock players, upload it to CSV. Not just that, but like you can see how chalky each lineup is. You can see what the optimal projection is, keep the lineups you want, get rid of the ones you don't like. So we got something for everybody. But if you want to check it out, you want to become, part of the team, use the best tools out there, we got you covered from top to bottom. Links in the description and chat, whether it's a week or a month, doesn't matter. But if you do, say what's up. Hit us up in the premium Discord. Come say hi. Don't be a stranger. You know what I mean? Come say hi. The premium Discord's awesome, and you can learn a ton in there from a lot of sharp people for sure. So yeah, we'd love to see you come over there and jump in. Whether it's the Sims, whether it's all of the tools, all the data, or the lineup generator, we got you. All right, Matt. So let's talk about some bats here. Just from the jump, you're going to see a lot of Cleveland against Feltner. I really like the Yankees against Griffin Canning today. Specifically Juan Soto in that spot. Like, this lefty versus righty matchup is fantastic. And Anaheim, the Angel Stadium has been really good for home runs. I mentioned it earlier. Last 3 years, top 3 for lefty homers, lefty power, top 5 for righty power. This is one of these spots. By the way, Canning, 7 of 9 home runs allowed have come against lefties. But I have a real affinity for these Yankee bats today out there in Anaheim. And they're not going to be cheap. I understand that. They're not going to be unowned. I get that. They still have the second highest stack score, second highest top stack probability on the slate for us in the tools, though.
Yeah, Yankees look great here. I don't think they look as good as Cleveland, but if Coors weren't on the slate, I think you'd see the Yankees ownership rise. Now, the guys you want from the Yankees are expensive, namely Judge and Soto. So yeah, you're going to have to concede to make things work there, but I've mentioned it a couple times. The stack I like the most is even more expensive in Philly. As bad as Dunning has been this year, he's still a major league pitcher, which I don't think Spencer Howard is. And the ballpark's not great for Philly either. I just love the matchup and lack of ownership that I'm really, really looking at the Phillies. Problem is they're so expensive that you might not even be able to roster one of the really good pitchers if you stack them. And that's risky on a slate like this because there are a bunch of other good, cheaper offenses to look at. So just a fun slate in that I kind of said it at the beginning. there's so many different ways you can prioritize builds.
Big time. And by the way, Dunning isn't confirmed yet, but he looks like the probable pitcher on a bunch of sites. We have him as the probable pitcher as well. Yeah, look, maybe Philly gets back on track today. It would be a good spot to do so. Do we have confirmation that it's Howard yet? I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either, but I'm seeing it a bunch of places. I don't know what they're going to do. I kind of hope it's not Howard so I don't have to stack them.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you're right. Cleveland still looks really good. I think Colorado looks good too, though, against McKenzie. There's nothing about McKenzie that really scares me all that much. You know, I think he's looked better, but you and I both agree he's been shaky at times too. Like he hasn't just been like, it's like, oh man, McKenzie, this guy looks great. He has an 11% barrel rate this year. It's pretty high, right? That's like third highest of any pitcher on this slate, and it's a 10-game slate with 20 pitchers going. He's allowed, I think he's allowed almost double-digit home runs this year. Let's see. Let me pull this up.
He just gave up 3 to the Mets last start. So
yeah. He's allowed as many home runs as anyone else on this slate. So actually, Castillo, McKenzie, Canning, Brown have all allowed 9. But like McKenzie does give up some power. He doesn't have elite strikeout stuff. I have no problem going to Colorado either. And, you know, something we've talked about a lot lately, but like the Colorado bats, you still don't have anyone even at $5,000 and largely because they aren't good, but stacking Colorado is just a routinely easy process.
So I was yes and no. So you're right. It's not hard, but they are like kind of pricey for who they are. Like Chris Bryant, 4,500. Blackman, 4,400. Elias Diaz, 4,900. So like they don't have the 2 guys like the Yankees do that are like crazy expensive. But if you're stacking the top of their lineup, like it's not the value stack that you'd want to get if stacking Colorado. But that doesn't really matter because you're not stacking them for value. You're stacking them because McKenzie hasn't been good this year. Matter of fact, Feltner's been better than McKenzie in most of the metrics so far this season. So yeah. I'm with you. I think Colorado does look good here. The thing is, like, Cleveland has those 3 expensive guys in Jimenez, Naylor, and J-Ram. But other than that, like, they're really cheap. So it's easy to play Cleveland.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely agree that they're expensive for who they are. However, Vegas tells the story, and they still have the 4th highest implied total on the slate. It's still a 5.2 run implied total, you know? So that's got to be good for something, right?
Yeah, so I guess you could look at it the other side of it, and maybe they're too cheap for who they are in this spot. When you click the names, it doesn't feel good, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm with you. I do like the Colorado side more than the Cleveland side here. It's just an ownership thing. I mean, even yesterday, Colorado, the top of their lineup wasn't very good, but they were all very low owned. So I think you'll see something similar today. My biggest problem, or I don't want to say problem, issue with stacking Colorado is there's just so many teams to look at on this slate. Atlanta, Toronto, Philly, Texas, or Arizona. All these teams, I think, look pretty viable.
What do you make of Atlanta? Jake Irvin's underlying numbers actually aren't that bad.
No, they're not. He's been decent, I guess is the best way to put it. Obviously with Atlanta, you've got the Acuna injury taking him out, which is a blow to their lineup, but makes them cheaper to stack. I want to see what their lineup looks like today. I know yesterday they rolled out Albies leading off against the lefty. Today they probably have Harris leading off. He'll look like one of the best bats on the slate. I like Atlanta here because they're Atlanta and they are not getting a ton of ownership. But I don't love the matchup, and I don't think they separate themselves from a bunch of the other teams on this slate.
You know what stands out to me though is like when you look at Atlanta and you look at Jake Irvin, his ISO against lefties is 268. XwOBA is 380. his XISO against righties is 142, and he has a 241 WOBA with a 300x WOBA against righties. So again, underlying numbers, expected rates on Jake Irvin against righties are actually good. Now, will that matter today? Do I think Jake Irvin's good? No, of course that's not what I'm saying. But I was a little bit surprised at how decent he's been against righties, for sure. And you got what? It's probably going to be a split line, probably like 5 righties, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 righties, 4 lefties. Well, 3 lefties and a switch hitter and Albies in this lineup.
Most of their good hitters are righties. Olsen, Albies is switch, as you said, but yeah, I mean, Sean Murphy, Ozuna, most
Olsen's
of their
a righty or a lefty.
Yeah, Olsen's a lefty. So you got Olsen and Albies and Kellenic. Not even sure who else is going to be batting lefty in this lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. I never hate Atlanta. It's just you're right that the price point comes down on the aggregate because of Acuna being out, but there's still, like, if you're playing, you still got 4 guys north of $5,000 on this team. And then if you're going, the difference with them is that there's some cheaper guys if you're going bottom of the order.
Yes, but also most of the time last year and at the beginning of this year, guys like Matt Olson were 6K. Now he's 5,300.
Yeah.
That adds up when you're stacking them,
Absolutely. Yeah. He's just been terrible outside of 1 or 2 games here or there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like overly enticed by the Braves. I think the thing that stands out about them is their lack of ownership, but I do like the Phillies more right now. Atlanta's also expensive. See, that's the difference. I just talked about how Atlanta guys are like 5,300, not 6K. The Philly guys are like 6K. Harper is 6K. Yeah. Alec Boehm is 5,900. Schwarber is 5,500. Like Bryson Stott is 5,500 or whatever. That makes it really difficult to stack.
Looking to see if there's any other spots that I like. Because I don't really have any intention, even if I'm not playing Castillo, of stacking against him or Wheeler. I don't love the Padres against Luzardo, White Sox against Gossman. Definitely not Washington against Fried. I don't love Minnesota against Reagans. I mean, I suppose because they're good against lefties, but still, do you really want to do that?
Definitely not for me. Miami actually is picking up some ownership because they're so cheap. If you want to, Miami's going to be the team to go to if you want a roster like Peralta and Wheeler, or one of the few teams you can go to that's not facing an elite pitcher. So I get Miami in that sense. They're overowned and they're bad, so I won't play them, but do with that info what you will.
What about Kansas City against Woods Richardson?
I don't hate that at all. And yeah, we have them slightly quote unquote over-owned in the tools. That ownership is negligible. I'm sure most of that is just coming from someone like Bobby Witt. This lineup's pretty good, especially against not great pitching. I don't think Woods Richardson is anything special. It's hard to want to stack the Royals and instead of the Indian or the Guardians and the Yankees, Braves, etc. But I think there's real upside here, so I got no issues with it.
Neither do I. He's also struggled more against righty bats, and Kansas City front loads that lineup with righty bats.
They've got a ton of righties, yeah.
Garcia, Witt, Perez, Velasquez, like likely four of your top 5 bats in this lineup today are right-handed.
Yeah, the only guy is Vinny P, who's a stud. Yeah. So, yeah, man, I kind of like that stack.
I don't hate it. 211x ISO against righties, 325x WOBA, 8% swinging strike rate for Woods Richardson. Doesn't it feel, and maybe I'm just off base here, but doesn't it feel just like eventually this guy is going to get tuned up?
100%. I'm with you. I mean, we've been saying that, I think, for like over a month, and nothing's changed. He's gotten by with some smoke and mirrors, but he's steadily gotten worse, in my opinion. And I think the blow up start is coming. The other thing is, and again, this is also in the weeds, and I'm not playing them because of this, but you got to like the guaranteed 9 at bats here on a slate with so many good options. I think you can look at tiebreakers like that.
Einsteinium, Laffy, Yankees or Arizona? Well, first of all, I mean, I guess we're assuming it's Dunning. We don't know yet. I do like the Yankees over Arizona personally, but I could see why people would like Arizona. Also, you know, they grade out pretty nicely. Like we have them as a pretty highly leveraged team right now. So there's that. I am curious though, Matt, to see how much changes once we get an actual listed pitcher for Texas.
Yeah, same. Dunning hasn't been great, but Arizona's also not good against righties. So I do prefer the Yankees there, but again, I don't think Arizona's a bad play.
Any other bats you want to get to?
I don't think so. Yeah, I guess the only team we didn't talk about we got to at least mention that's projected to be the highest owned team on the slate is Toronto. Any thoughts on them?
Oh yeah, against Clevenger.
We've seen this a bunch recently because Toronto hasn't been great, but they've got good names in their lineup. So they're priced down and people want to play them. I can't argue it that much because they're so much cheaper. Like when you've got Bryson Stott at 5,100 and Bo Bichette at 4,300, like, you know what I mean? I like Bryson Stott a lot, but I'm just saying the Blue Jays are cheap.
Yeah. Against Clevenger. Yeah, I get it. He will give up power. He's not particularly good. He hasn't gotten out of the fifth inning in a start this season. It's not like you're worried about the White Sox bullpen either.
Oh, yeah, that's trash. And Clevenger, man, he might be the actual worst pitcher on the slate. Spencer Howard could give him a run for his money, but I understand the Toronto ownership. They're very cheap all over in one of the best matchups on the entire board, and they're guaranteed 9 at bats. You got Davis Snyder leading off at 4,300. Guerrero's 5K, but that's not anything crazy. Bichette 43, Turner 41. They're too cheap.
I think the only tough part here is that they are also the most negatively leveraged stack on the slate.
Yeah, that's ultimately why I will not get to them. Like this is a clear, like they're over-owned, and it's not minimal ownership. It's not like the Royals. Like Toronto will be owned because it's easy to roster them with good pitchers. And even yesterday with Coors in play, Toronto was the highest owned stack. Obviously, you had like J-Ram, very high owned, but all the Toronto guys were pretty chalky. And I think you're going to see the same thing here. So many other places to go on the slate. I won't play them, but they're in a good spot. It's undeniable.
I'm not getting much of them in the Sims right now at all. Favorite 100 lineups, and I have like four Toronto stacks. So not a lot. Last one before we get out of here. By the way, guys, if you don't mind, take a second, hit that thumbs up. Oh, and if you're looking for another deposit bonus, I know some of you are wise with your money. Might even say frugal, which is a good thing. We talk about all of these places where they're giving bonuses out. Betr, BETR, has got the $500 first match deposit bonus right now. So you're doubling your first match bonus. Up to $500. You don't need $500, right? If you have 50, if you have 20, 100, or 500, doesn't matter. They're doubling it out of the gate. So instant bonuses, usually you want to grab them when you can. If you're in states where Betr is illegal or where it's legal and sports betting may not be available, simplest, most easiest way to just get additional funds out of the gate is to take advantage of every sign-up bonus you can. Shit, I've done it for every sports book I possibly could. And as new ones become available in Pennsylvania, you best believe I'll do it the day that it happens. Hopefully before when they do the pre-launch opportunities. But yeah, up to $500 first match deposit bonus. Getting in on the pick'em sites, just like all of the others, except this bonus is better than most of them. So link in the description. Mike just threw it in chat if you're not there yet. Be smart with your money. Double it up out of the gate. Last one I want to talk about, Seattle. Someone asked in chat, but I also mentioned it earlier in the show that I am not opposed to Seattle stacks. But yeah, I talk often and probably too much about loving to get to righty pitchers against the Seattle Mariners. But hey, Hunter Brown's going to be one of the most popular pitchers on the slate. And it's not like he's exactly proven to be stellar this season. He's cheap. That's good. It's a good strikeout matchup and a good park. So you can check a lot of boxes in favor of Hunter Brown today. And I'll have a good amount of Hunter Brown, I would imagine. But I'd be lying to you, Matt, if I told you I'd be surprised if Seattle came away with 3 home runs through the first 4 innings either.
No, not even a little bit, especially with Julio Rodriguez going finally. Had taken a while. We've seen this from him before where in past years where he's goes through very cold stretches and then gets red hot. Seems like he's in one of those hot stretches right now. Sealing bags, finally hitting home runs. I think in the past 3 games, he's got 2 homers and at least 2 steals, maybe 3 steals. So starting to see the ball better, and he just obviously makes that lineup go. So yeah, I view Seattle and Hunter Brown similar. You kind of know what you're getting with both. Seattle's going to strike out a lot, but they also have upside if they can put bat on ball. And Brown, if he's on his A game, I think he can get through this lineup pretty easily. But if he's not, his floor is super low. So I agree with you. I think both sides are wildly in play. I lean the Brown side just because there's so many other offenses to go to, whereas there's not so many other $6,500 pitchers to go to. But I see both sides 100%.
Top 3 pitchers. This should be fun. Top 3 pitchers for this one today.
So I'm going to go with Freddy Peralta, number 1.
Whoa.
I am going to go with Hunter Brown, number 2, because I actually think his ownership, while it'll be decent with Matt Waldron sticking out, like I think Brown comes in significantly lower. I think Brown's the better pitcher. So give me Peralta, Brown, and Raggins. I'm going to skip out on Wheeler. I love Wheeler. It's just that I don't think you're wrong to have him number 1,
If weather cooperates, I'll go Kevin Gausman, Matt Waldron, and actually I put this guy second. I put Waldron. Waldron and Brown to me are like the same today. Just blow up potential and also good matchup. Give me Max Fried. The more and more I look at Max Fried, the more I like this matchup. And look, I'm not saying you ride the momentum wave necessarily, but my God, has he been, outside of one start, Matt, he has just been fantastic.
Yeah, he's been so good. And they got to their bullpen a little bit earlier than they wanted to yesterday. So maybe they lean on Fried a little bit more. I could definitely see that. But I think that goes to show you how deep this slate is as far as pitchers go. We each said 3 completely different pitchers, and we left off like 5 guys.
Yep. Give me your top 3 stacks.
Stacks is going to be I'll go Guardians number 1 because I just think they're by far the best. Then Phillies, who I've talked about a lot. Then I'll ride with you on the Yankees.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Yankees, Guardians, and Rockies for me. I think there's still meat on the bone with this Rockies team as far as ownership goes. Like still a positively leveraged spot. Give me that. And then home runs. I'll give you mine, Matt, if you want to find one for yourself. I'll go to the Yankees. Juan Soto, that's my Dinger Tuesday pick that we do over on Odd Shopper for Dinger Tuesday over on FanDuel. You guys already know, right? If you're on FanDuel, you get. So if you select a pitcher, $25 plus bet. If he homers, you get paid out on whatever that is. But you also get $5 per every homer in that game. So like, let's say Soto homers and I've got a half a unit play on it. So say you throw $50 on Soto at plus 255, you get paid out on that. Plus if there's 4 other homers in that game, then you're getting $25 in bonus bets as well, which I usually use on a massive round or a massive parlay and just throw it back down the tubes, but it's fun. Anyway, give me Juan Soto. 12 of 14 homers are against lefties this year. 3rd best lefty homer park in the league. And Griffin Canning, 7 of 9 homers against him have been lefties. Massive X-ISO against lefties as well.
I'm going to make this completely go full circle, and I'm going to go with someone on your Rocky stack. Give me Chris Bryant to go yard today.
Okay. I like it. Let's go, man. Chris Bryant, Juan Soto. Let's hope these Yankee bats wake up or stay awake. Sorry. Appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Hey, tell your friends about the show, about the channel. Tell them they can listen anywhere. And tell them to come check us out at Stokastic or oddshopper.com. Either way, we'll see you guys back here tonight. You got Live Before Lock for baseball. Should be Greg and Matt. Got live before lock for basketball. They'll be on playback, hanging out after that. We got you covered all night. Could be back-to-back sweeps in the NBA conference finals. Man, that is something else. Anyway,
That sucks.
yeah, it does. Hopefully the finals is good. See you soon. Peace.